My name is Vanessa Blake. I'm 37 years old, founder and CEO of a tech company you've probably used this week without even knowing it. But this story doesn't start in a boardroom. It starts at a backyard barbecue, where my sister unknowingly stepped into the most poetic twist of her life. It was one of those sunny Saturday afternoons where the air smells like overcooked burgers and generational trauma. My parents were hosting their usual family reunion BBQ, a yearly event, where my success was conveniently ignored while my sister Rachel got praised for things like networking and knowing how to wear heels properly. She's 35, just 2 years younger than me, but in my parents' eyes, she's always been the golden girl. Beauty pageants, student government, the whole perfect package fantasy. Meanwhile, I was the one tinkering with circuit boards in the basement building websites instead of dating launching prototypes when she was launching lip gloss reviews on Instagram. So there we were, red Solo cups in hand, cheap folding chairs lining the lawn, when Rachel stood up with this smug little smirk on her face and clinked her glass like she was about to announce a royal engagement. "Big news, everyone," she said, hair flawless, voice syrupy. "I've got a final round interview at one of the top tech companies in the country, Nexus Labs." Applause erupted. Someone yelled, "That's our girl." My mother looked like she might cry from pride. And me, I nearly choked on my lemonade. Because Nexus Labs is mine. I built it from the ground up. I coded the first product in my cramped studio apartment on a $300 laptop. I slept under my desk for years. I pitched to investors who wouldn't even look me in the eye. I turned ramen noodles and rejection into a billion-dollar valuation. But none of them knew that, because I never told them. To my family, I was just the weird one who worked online. They never asked what I did, and I stopped offering. So now there she was, bragging about applying to my company, having no clue that the final interview she was so excited about was going to be with me. "And the cherry on top, I did a little LinkedIn stalking," she giggled. "Apparently the CEO is a woman, but I've never heard of her. Vanessa Griffin, I think. Total nobody before this." Griffin. My mother's maiden name. I'd taken it legally when I started the company, a fresh start, a clean break from being Vanessa Blake, the forgotten daughter. I stood there in silence, letting the fire pit crackle and the weight of what was coming settle in my chest like warm armor. Because I wasn't just going to show up to that interview, I was going to remind my sister exactly who she underestimated, not with words, not with revenge, but with power. And the look on her face when she walked into that conference room, let's just say, I'll never forget it. Growing up in the Blake household was like being a side character in someone else's coming-of-age movie. And let me be clear, I wasn't just any side character. I was the one who didn't even make the credits. From the outside, we looked picture-perfect, suburban charm, 2-story home with white shutters. Dad was a dentist, Mom taught 3rd grade. But inside those walls, everything revolved around Rachel. She was the blonde-haired, hazel-eyed darling who wore ribbons in her hair and won most polite in preschool. I, on the other hand, was the weird kid who took apart remote controls and tried to rewire my nightlight to blink in Morse code. At 10, our parents didn't get it. They didn't want to. I still remember the time Rachel won a local modeling contest. Nothing huge, just a photo in the town newsletter and a $75 gift card. But you would have thought she'd just landed a Vogue cover. My mom framed that picture and put it above the fireplace, right next to the family portrait. That photo stayed up for 10 years. Meanwhile, I won first place at a regional robotics fair in 7th grade, beat out teams from 3 states, and my award ended up in the junk drawer. Not even a magnet spot on the fridge. When I asked why they didn't come to the award ceremony, my dad didn't even look up from his crossword. "You know, we don't really understand that tech stuff, sweetheart. But hey, did you see how great Rachel looked at the dance recital?" Every achievement I earned felt invisible, and it wasn't just the big things, it was the everyday reminders. At dinner, Rachel got the bigger piece of steak. At Christmas, her gifts came in delicate boxes from actual department stores. Mine bargain bin books on women in science that felt more like statements than presents. Even our birthdays weren't safe. She had pool parties and professional balloons. I had, "You can invite 3 friends, max." It's funny, you start believing it, that you're just less pretty, less valuable, less worthy of attention. So I stopped trying to win theirs. Instead, I turned inward. Books became my sanctuary. Code became my language. While Rachel perfected her selfie angles, I was building primitive games on a hand-me-down desktop from Dad's office. She thought it was weird. Mom called it a phase. Dad warned me that too much screen time would rot my brain. But the irony, those long nights of isolation built the foundation for everything I have now. Still, that doesn't erase what it felt like to always come in second, or third, or dead last. In high school, Rachel was homecoming princess. I was editor of the yearbook, working late every night designing her page spread. At graduation, she gave a speech filled with recycled quotes and cliché jokes. Everyone clapped. I quietly collected my award for the highest STEM GPA and left the stage without a single cheer. When college rolled around, she got a new Honda Civic and a full dorm kit from Pottery Barn. I got a used laptop and a "You're so independent, honey, we know you'll figure it out." That line became their excuse for everything. Vanessa's the strong one. She doesn't need as much. She's fine. What they didn't see, what they never bothered to see, was that being fine was code for you don't matter as much. But I did what I always did. I learned to thrive without applause, to chase results instead of recognition, to hustle in the dark so no one could diminish what I built. I didn't realize it then, but their silence, their neglect, was training me for something Rachel would never be prepared for: self-sufficiency. She was built for praise. I was built for pressure. And pressure. That's where diamonds form. So when I dropped out of my fancy Ivy League law program and started what Rachel mockingly called my little tech experiment, I didn't flinch. I already knew what it felt like to be underestimated. But this time I wasn't interested in proving myself to them. I was building something bigger than validation. I was building freedom. And the day Rachel sat down in that interview chair across from me, completely unaware that her strong, independent sister now ran a billion-dollar empire. Let's just say, I stopped being second best. That day, I became unforgettable. There's a special kind of sting that comes from being mocked by your own family. Not strangers, not trolls online, but the people who watched you grow up, held your hand during chickenpox, shared your bathroom, and still somehow never really saw you. I was 27 when I officially launched my startup. No investor money, no fancy co-founder. Just a refurbished MacBook, a pile of notebooks filled with messy wireframes, and a stubborn refusal to live the life my parents expected of me. I'd just left law school. Yes, left. Not flunked out. Not took a break. I walked away from a Columbia JD and a six-figure debt path because I realized one semester in, I was doing it for all the wrong reasons. For them. For respect. For that moment when maybe they'd finally look at me and say, "We're proud of you." But that moment never came. And by the time I told my parents I was dropping out to start a tech platform that connected freelance project managers to remote startups, they looked at me like I'd joined a cult. "You're throwing away your future," my dad said, pacing the kitchen like he was calculating my funeral costs. Mom just stared at her tea. "You always were impulsive, Vanessa." But the real kicker came from Rachel. We were standing outside after dinner, just the two of us, when she leaned in and said with that glossy smile, "So, your little startup, is that like an Uber for spreadsheets or something?" She laughed, out loud, tossed her hair like it was the funniest thing she'd ever said. I didn't laugh. I just blinked. She kept going, of course. "I mean, I guess it's cute, right? Like being your own boss and working in coffee shops. So boho. I just don't think I could live like that. No security, no health insurance, no salary. But hey, you do you. That phrase, you do you, sounds supportive on Instagram captions. But in real life, it stings like a slap when it's laced with condescension. Especially coming from someone whose career highlights included running social media for a boutique jewelry brand that was really just her roommate's Etsy store. But I stayed quiet, because I'd learned early on people who laugh at your beginning have no imagination for your future. So I worked. Hard. While Rachel was brunching and hashtagging #hustle with a mimosa in hand, I was cold emailing startup founders, refining code, teaching myself UX design from midnight, YouTube marathons, and eating eggs for every meal because protein was cheap. I went months without buying anything new. No clothes, no shoes, no nights out. Every cent went into the platform, and every day I thought about that moment in the backyard, her smirk, her giggle, the word little. She had no idea she'd given me the best fuel of my life, because when someone you love belittles your dream, it does one of two things: it crushes you, or it carves something unstoppable in your chest. For me, it was the second. Within 14 months, I had 300 active users. By year 2, we hit $400K in revenue. I hired my first employee, a brilliant developer I found in an online community who took a chance on a stranger with a big vision and a small bank account. I incorporated the company under the name Nexus Labs, and to separate myself fully, I legally changed my professional name to Vanessa Griffin, my mother's maiden name, a nod to the woman who raised me on quiet grit and always told me, "Don't wait to be chosen." I didn't. I chose myself. And while Rachel kept posting inspirational quotes about chasing dreams, I was living one she couldn't even imagine. Yet she still had no idea. Because I didn't post my wins. I didn't send family group texts when we crossed $1 million valuation. I didn't rub it in at holidays. I showed up, ate the casserole, smiled through the "you still doing that online app thing" questions, and went back to building an empire while they all slept. But deep down, I always wondered, what would she say if she knew, if she realized the little startup she laughed at now had 60 employees, 2 office spaces, and had just closed a Series B at $70 million? I didn't have to wonder for long. Because 3 months after that backyard barbecue, our hiring manager forwarded me a resume. It had Rachel's name at the top. She was applying for a content strategist role at Nexus Labs. And there in her cover letter, as if fate was playing a prank on both of us, she wrote, "I've long admired Nexus Labs for its innovation and female-led leadership. As someone passionate about empowering entrepreneurs, I believe my experience aligns perfectly with your mission." I stared at the screen for a full minute before laughing out loud. Long admired. She didn't even know I owned the company. Not yet. But she would. And for once, I would be the one holding the decision. Success has a sound. To some, it's applause, shouting crowds, bank alerts, champagne corks. But for me, it was silence, the kind you sit in for hours, the kind that hums from a cheap desk fan at 3 a.m. while the world sleeps and your fingers won't stop coding, the kind that whispers, "No one believes in you yet." After dropping out of law school and launching Nexus Labs, I didn't just disappear from my family's radar, I buried myself beneath it. No big press releases, no LinkedIn announcements, no shiny co-founder to hype me on podcasts, just me, and a belief no one else could see. I rented a windowless office inside a repurposed warehouse in East Brooklyn. The floors creaked, the heat barely worked, the Wi-Fi cut out every other week. I loved it. It was mine. Each morning started the same black coffee, deep breath, back straight. Each night ended with swollen eyes, energy drinks, and a screen that blurred between burnout and breakthrough. Rachel's laughter haunted me. Every time I hit a bug in the code or a potential investor ghosted me, I'd hear her saying Uber for spreadsheets, and I'd push harder. I remember one night, 2:41 a.m. My platform crashed during beta testing. I had no engineer, no backup, just YouTube tutorials, forums, and panic. I fixed it in 4 hours, slept on a yoga mat under my desk, woke up at 7:00 a.m. to take a pitch call in a blazer and pajama bottoms. The investor said no. I didn't flinch, because I was getting used to that answer. No. It became my breakfast and my fuel. No taught me where to look for better clients. No taught me how to answer the next question. No taught me that rejection is just a redirection no one asked for. By the end of my first year, Nexus Labs had 87 clients. Not flashy, not headline-worthy, but real. Bootstrapped, profitable, and growing. I hired my first employee, Lena, a whip-smart UX designer from Detroit who could spot friction in a user flow like a hawk spots prey. We worked side by side on a couch that smelled faintly like old ramen and ambition. We added 2 developers, then a marketing lead, then a CFO. Not because I needed to scale, but because I needed sleep. During that time, Rachel posted photos from content retreats in Tulum. Her captions were all manifest this and abundance that. And yet, She lived paycheck to paycheck, cycling through freelance gigs, chasing influencer deals, and occasionally moving back home when rent caught up with her. But still, to our parents, she was the successful one. I remember visiting home once, a quick stop on my way to a Women in Tech summit, where I was scheduled to speak on a panel with Forbes execs. At dinner, my dad asked Rachel how her latest video series was going. They didn't ask me anything, not even where I was headed. I didn't tell them. Why would I? They had chosen who they wanted to believe in, and I had chosen silence. I poured my energy into systems, strategy, team building. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was trying to outlast every doubt they ever handed me. Year 3 came with a new office in Soma. Not a rental. Ours. Rachel still didn't know, neither did my parents. And I wasn't hiding it out of spite. I was protecting my peace. I didn't want congratulations from people who weren't there for the building, who didn't hold the ladder while I climbed, who didn't offer water when I was parched, only opinions. I wanted my wins to come without explanation. When I made my first $1 million in revenue, I took myself to dinner. Alone. I wore a black dress, no makeup, sat at a corner table, ordered steak and wine, and toasted to the woman no one believed in who never stopped believing in herself. No cameras, no press, just power. I didn't need applause. I had profit, I had purpose, and I had peace. Until one morning. I got an email from my hiring director, candidate Rachel Blake, position content strategist. Attached was her resume. Still had that glossy tone, still dripping with inflated accomplishments. But this time, she'd written, "My passion for helping female-founded companies reach wider audiences has led me to Nexus Labs, a brand I truly admire." The same company she once laughed at. The same woman she once mocked. Now she was asking for a seat at the table I built. Silently. Brick by digital brick. While she posted quotes, I posted profit. And now it was my turn to speak. When I started Nexus Labs, I knew I needed a clean break. Not just from my old career, but from my old identity. So I dropped Blake. Not legally, not for good, but for business. From that moment on, I became Vanessa Griffin, a name most people in my family wouldn't even recognize if it showed up on CNBC. Griffin was my mother's maiden name. Simple, strong, easy to remember. And most importantly, it had no baggage. No echoes of being the weird one, the quiet one, the she's just good with computers girl. Vanessa Griffin was a blank slate. And I was ready to write something no one could erase. For 3 years I operated that way. Built quietly, scaled efficiently, refused the spotlight unless it served the mission. And it worked. By year 4, Nexus Labs was getting real traction. Our platform wasn't just a tool, it had become infrastructure for remote-first teams across dozens of industries. We weren't flashy. We were essential. Still, I kept the Griffin identity separate from the Blakes. It wasn't about revenge, it was about protection. I needed space to grow without the noise of old opinions or misplaced doubt. But sometimes, the past has a way of knocking loud and clueless. That knock came in the form of Rachel's resume. She had applied through a third-party recruiter, completely unaware that Nexus Labs was run by the sister whose dreams she once ridiculed. What made it poetic? Her cover letter. It practically gushed, "I admire how Nexus Labs was founded by a visionary female leader. Women like Vanessa Griffin inspire me to push harder in male-dominated industries." I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Rachel, my sister, who once said I was playing pretend with my little website, now wanted to work for me. Not with me. For me. And she had no idea. I forwarded the application to my head of HR with a single line, "Move her forward. I'll do the final round myself." I wanted to see it. The moment her world tilted, the moment she realized the woman she admired from afar was the same one she ignored for decades. The day of the interview came fast. She walked into the conference room, polished and radiant heels clicking, resume folder in hand, completely unaware of the slow-burn drama about to unfold. I stood behind the glass partition as she settled into the seat across the table. My assistant looked at me and whispered, "You ready?" Oh, I was more than ready. I stepped in, calm, composed, wearing the exact confidence I once begged my family to see in me. Her eyes scanned me, searching. a flicker of confusion, then forced brightness. "Hi," she said, offering her hand. "I'm Rachel." I know I said, smiling as I shook it. "I'm Vanessa Griffin." Pause, then, that moment. That glorious, flickering glitch in the matrix moment where her brain connected the dots it had ignored for years. Her jaw didn't drop, but her eyes did. "Oh," she said, blinking rapidly. You look so familiar. I watched her try to piece it together, watched her panic behind perfectly lined lashes. "I guess I just wasn't expecting the founder to be you." "And why is that?" "No, I mean," she stammered, laughing nervously. "It's just, Griffin. I didn't realize." "You didn't know Vanessa Griffin was Vanessa Blake." Silence. The words hung between us like a truth bomb wrapped in ribbon. She stared. Then finally, "You're the CEO." I nodded. She swallowed. "I didn't know. I didn't connect the names." I leaned back in my chair, cool and calm. "Most people don't. That's the thing about building something in silence. It tends to speak louder when it's finished." She tried to recover, praised the platform, the mission, the brand. It was awkward. It was painful. It was perfect. And yet somewhere in her voice I heard it, genuine respect, not because I was her sister, but because she finally saw me not as the girl in the corner with a laptop, but as the woman who built an empire without her. She didn't ask for the job after that. I didn't offer it either. Instead, I ended the interview the way I'd always dreamed of ending a moment like that. "Thanks for coming in, Rachel. We'll be in touch." She nodded, too stunned to argue. And as she left, I watched her walk past the wall in the lobby, the one with all our press features framed in glass. Her eyes paused on a magazine cover. Me in a navy blazer. Bold headline, "The Quiet Visionary, How Vanessa Griffin is Rewiring Remote Work." She stared at it for a full 10 seconds. And in that moment, I knew she finally recognized the name. Too late. But loud enough to last. I wish I could tell you Rachel's interview ended there, that she walked away humbled, that I walked away vindicated, and that the story wrapped up with some poetic full-circle bow. But life doesn't work that cleanly. No, the real twist didn't happen during the interview. It came afterward when I started reading between the lines. The day after Rachel sat across from me, stammering through her first real moment of recognition, I received an email from my director of People Ops. Subject line, something, off about the resume. Attached were 2 versions of Rachel's application. One was the one we received through the recruiter. The other, a public LinkedIn version that painted a very different picture. And there it was, the twist in the tale Rachel had embellished nearly everything. Titles inflated, timelines blurred, job duties exaggerated to sound like she ran the show when in reality she'd bounced from gig to gig none longer than a year. But the line that really grabbed me: a bullet point under key collaborations worked directly with Vanessa Blake, founder of Nexus Labs, on early-stage strategy and audience development. My full name, not Vanessa Griffin Blake. The nerve. She had claimed she worked with me on my company, as if casual dinner conversations and occasional snide remarks at family reunions qualified as business consulting. I stared at that sentence for a full minute, not sure whether to laugh, scream, or both. It wasn't just misleading, it was fiction. She hadn't worked with me. She'd mocked me. She'd stood on the sidelines sipping cocktails while I bled into code and contracts, and now she was trying to spin proximity into credit. But here's the twist within the twist. She wasn't the only one. Over the last 2 years, Nexus had grown rapidly. We'd hired dozens of team members, scaled partnerships across 3 continents, and appeared in just enough media outlets to make some people curious. Suddenly, long-lost cousins, high school classmates, and yes, even old family members were finding ways to reconnect. Emails began with, "So proud of all you've accomplished," and ended with thinly veiled favors. But Rachel's was the boldest. She didn't just want to claim association. She wanted in, not out of admiration, but out of necessity. According to a background report HR quietly ran after spotting the resume inconsistencies, Rachel's freelance income had dried up. Her latest influencer partnership had ended in public dispute, and her savings almost gone. She needed this job. That made what came next harder. Because I'm not a monster. And despite everything, despite the years of dismissal, the taunts, the eye rolls, and the total absence of support, a part of me still remembered her as the girl who used to braid my hair when we were little. A part of me wanted to help. But I also knew this. If I gave her the job, I'd be reinforcing the very dynamic I fought so hard to escape, rescuing the golden child while I carried the weight. So I made a different decision. I called her, directly. She answered after 2 rings, her voice overly bright. "Hey, Vanessa." I could hear the careful enthusiasm in her tone, the way she was trying to sound casual, as if our last meeting hadn't shattered every illusion she'd built. "I wanted to talk," I said, "not as your interviewer, as your sister." Silence. Then a soft, "Okay." "I read your resume," I said. "And I need to be honest with you. What you wrote about working with me, that didn't happen, not in the way you implied." I could practically hear the breath catch in her throat. "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. I figured we talked about your work sometimes, and I helped shape your thinking. Indirectly, maybe. You didn't." I let the words land. "You didn't help. You didn't believe. You didn't ask a single question when I was building this thing from scratch." "Vanessa." "You mocked it," I continued calmly. "You laughed at it. You called it cute and told me to get a real job, and now you want to attach yourself to something you dismissed." There was a long pause. "I didn't realize," she said, finally her voice cracking. "I didn't see how serious it was. I didn't see you. That got to me. Because maybe that was the truth beneath it all. They didn't see me, and that invisibility over time taught me to shine without their light." "I'm not calling to shame you," I said, "but I can't hire you. Not like this. I understand." I wasn't sure she did, but I could hear the weight in her voice, then something unexpected. "I was jealous," she admitted. "You always made things look easy, even when they weren't. And I guess I didn't want to feel small next to you, so I made you small instead." I let that sit in the silence between us. Then I said, "I don't need an apology. I just need you to understand that this company, it wasn't given to me. I fought for every inch. I know that now. That mattered more than I expected." After the call, I sat alone in my office, her resume still on my screen, her old LinkedIn still open in another tab, and for the first time in years, I felt something unexpected toward my sister. Not anger, not pity, but clarity. This wasn't about her anymore. It never really was. This was about how far I'd come and how powerful it is to choose yourself even when no one else does. She tried to write herself into my story, but I had already written my own. And in my version, I don't hand out seats. I build the table. I thought the worst was over after that phone call with Rachel. I thought her awkward admission, her flimsy justifications, her voice shaking through apology was the end of it. But I was wrong. Because a week later, one of my investors forwarded me an article, a startup blog known more for gossip than insight, but widely read in tech circles. The headline, "From Family Ties to Founder Insights, Is Nexus Labs More Than a One-Woman Show?" My chest tightened. I clicked the link, and there it was. A thinly veiled feature on my company, complete with a full paragraph about how early-stage creative development had been shaped by the founder's sister, a marketing strategist and influencer with deep experience in brand storytelling. My jaw clenched. Buried in that paragraph was a direct quote. Vanessa may have had the tech vision, but I was the one who helped translate it into something the market would care about. And the name attached to that quote, Rachel Blake. I reread it 3 times trying to process what I was seeing. She had gone public. She had used my company again as a launchpad for herself. This time not in a resume, but in press. And worse, she did it after our conversation, after saying she understood, after telling me she saw me now. I sat frozen in my chair, my screen illuminating the betrayal. This wasn't ignorance. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was calculated. Rachel had realized something. She couldn't get hired, but she could still attach, still benefit, still spin. She had found a way to rewrite the narrative not within my company, but around it. The blog wasn't major, Not Forbes, not TechCrunch, but it was enough. Enough to plant seeds, enough to make people whisper, enough to make it seem like she'd been there from day one. That's the thing about lies. They don't need to be big. They just need to feel believable. And because we shared DNA, people wanted to believe it. Because who wouldn't help their sister build a billion-dollar business who wouldn't be part of something that successful? If given the chance. She was banking on that. She was banking on the world, assuming I was too focused, too humble, too head down to deny her credit. But this was different. This wasn't a petty slight or a snide comment. This was professional sabotage, subtle but strategic. I called my publicist. "We're shutting this down," I said. She sighed. "I was hoping you'd say that. We've had 2 media inquiries today asking if there's family drama behind the success story." My stomach dropped. That fast. That easy. That's how fragile credibility is, especially for women in power. It only takes one whisper to turn respect into doubt. And for me, the hardest part wasn't the PR. It wasn't the optics. It was the violation. She had told the world she helped build something she never even believed in. She'd taken credit for something I sacrificed everything to create. While I was skipping meals and sleeping under my desk, she was at rooftop brunches calling me delusional. And now, she was trying to wear my struggle like it was hers. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. But I didn't. I did what I always do when people underestimate me. I got strategic. First, we issued a quiet correction to the blog. My PR team called it a misrepresentation of facts, and the line was removed within 12 hours. Second, we updated Nexus's official press page with a new bio, founded solely by Vanessa Griffin. Nexus Labs is the product of 5 years of tireless work, independent vision, and a deep commitment to redefining remote work. No outside co-founders, no silent partners, no inherited platform, just earned momentum. Third, I called Rachel. Again, she answered after one ring. "Hey," she said, "I figured you might call. You lied to the press." A pause. "Then I didn't lie. I just told my version. There is no version." "Rachel, you weren't there. You weren't involved. You mocked it. And now you're trying to rewrite history because it's convenient for your brand." Her voice hardened. "I just wanted to be part of something real. You never included me." I laughed bitterly. "You were never interested in being part of the work. You want to be part of the reward." She didn't respond. I kept going. "I don't owe you proximity. I don't owe you a spotlight. And if you pull this again, I will go public with the truth, names, receipts, timelines. Don't mistake my silence for softness." Silence on her end. Then she whispered, "I just wanted a win, Vanessa. Something that made me feel like I mattered." That stopped me, because for a second it almost sounded like the girl I used to know, the one who held my hand crossing the street. But then I remembered I had wanted a win too, and no one handed it to me. I earned mine. Alone. "You don't get to steal one," I said, and hung up. Later that week I received a letter, handwritten, from Rachel. It said, "You were right. I didn't build this, but I think I needed the world to believe I mattered, even if it meant stepping into a story that wasn't mine. I'm sorry. No excuses, no manipulation, just truth." And for the first time in a long time, I saw not the sister who ridiculed me, but the one who finally understood me. Still, forgiveness isn't permission, and recognition doesn't mean reconciliation. The damage was done. But now, the narrative was mine again, and I intended to own it loudly, clearly, and without compromise. Because if there's one thing Rachel taught me, it's that when you don't tell your story, someone else will. And they might just turn it into a resume lie with your name on it. Sure. Here is part 8 of the story titled, "The Truth Unveiled," from the series My Sister Mocked My Little Startup, Then Applied for a Job at My Billion-Dollar Company, written in American storytelling style and consistent narrative tone. I was sitting in my glass-walled office at Nexus HQ the morning after the interview, sipping my second espresso, when Julia from HR pinged me. "You'll want to see this." The applicant you flagged her resume raised some questions. I clicked the file, already suspecting where this was going, but nothing could have prepared me for how much fabrication Abigail had layered into her credentials. She'd claimed to have led multiple digital transformation initiatives for high-profile clients, none of which her former employers could verify. Her Harvard Legal Tech certification, non-existent. Her 3-month consulting role with a boutique Silicon Valley firm. It had shut down 2 years before she said she joined. The HR notes included words like embellishment, discrepancy, and potential integrity issue. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. The old me, the one desperate for approval, might have protected her, might have made excuses. But I wasn't that girl anymore. By noon, I had a meeting scheduled with HR Legal and our head of ethics. We take integrity seriously, especially at the executive level, but the ethical conundrum wasn't just hers, it was mine. I'd built a company rooted in transparency. Could I really let my sister walk into a leadership role under a cloud of lies just because we shared DNA? The final nail came with the call from her reference at Harlan & Burke. She was an okay mid-level associate, but she never led the projects she mentioned. Frankly, she was good at taking credit for other people's work. My blood chilled. That was a sentence I had heard once before from one of my early co-founders years ago when we parted ways. That evening, I walked the halls of the office long after the staff had left. The city below blinked alive with 1,000 ambitions, each light representing someone chasing something. I paused near our mission statement etched in steel near the entrance, Integrity, Innovation, and Impact. My name was on the building now. My vision built the foundation beneath every employee's feet. But family that was still complicated territory. I picked up the phone and called Abigail. She answered on the first ring as if she'd been waiting. "Hey, how'd it go?" Her voice was too breezy, too performative. "Abigail," I said quietly, "we need to talk about your resume." There was a beat of silence. "What about it?" she asked, voice tightening. I read it. So did our HR and legal departments. You padded your experience and a few items are flat out false. She laughed nervously. "Come on, Diana. Everyone exaggerates a little. It's a job application, not a sworn affidavit." "You applied to my company," I replied, my voice calm but ice-edged. "You mocked my startup, belittled my ambition for years, and now you're asking to lead a division built on values you never respected using lies." There was silence again, heavier this time. "I didn't think you'd be so harsh," she finally said. "It's not about being harsh. It's about being fair to every honest applicant who didn't get a call back because they didn't inflate their credentials. You don't get a pass just because we share parents." I could hear her trying to hold back emotion. "I just wanted a chance." "No," I said gently. "You wanted a shortcut." I didn't hang up on her. I let the silence do the parting. And when the call ended, I knew the hard part wasn't over. Tomorrow I'd have to sit with HR and make a final decision. But one thing was clear. This was no longer a story about being the overlooked sister. It was about finally being the woman who didn't need anyone's approval to do what was right. Graduation day, 4 years ago. I stood behind the podium in a wrinkled gown holding a speech I'd rewritten 3 times the night before, hands trembling but voice steady. Back then I didn't know who was really listening. Today, everyone would be. The keynote stage at the Women in Tech Global Summit was set beneath crystal chandeliers and LED walls looping images of featured innovators. And there, among faces like Melinda Gates and Reshma Saujani, Vanessa Griffin, founder and CEO, Nexus Labs. The moment I stepped out from behind the curtain, the room buzzed. The kind of buzz that said, "She's the one we're here for." This wasn't just a panel. It wasn't a fireside Q&A or some moderated coffee chat. This was the keynote, the one they closed the event with, because they saved the fire for last, and I was the match. I started slow, letting the silence settle before speaking. When I started my company, I said the loudest voices were the ones telling me it would never work. Not industry analysts, not my competitors, but my own family. That hit. People sat forward. A few stiffened in empathy. My sister once told me I was just playing entrepreneur, that I should be more realistic, more conventional, more like her. She didn't believe in my vision until she tried to apply for a job at the company she said would fail. A ripple of quiet laughter stirred in the back rows. But I wasn't here to humiliate. I was here to reveal. What I learned from that moment, and the thousands of silent ones leading up to it, is that people will only recognize your worth once the world forces them to. That's why we can't build our dreams for validation. We build them for ourselves. The applause started soft, then louder, then sustained. But I wasn't done. I told them about the 3 a.m. coding breakdowns, the ramen dinners, the yoga mat naps under a secondhand desk. I told them how success isn't built in pitch rooms. It's forged in the moments you decide not to quit, even when no one's watching. Especially then. My sister didn't break me. She sharpened me, I said. Because every dismissive comment, every eye roll, every time she called my idea cute, it carved a fire I couldn't extinguish. She taught me how to succeed without applause, and when the applause finally came, I didn't need it. I'd already won. When I walked off that stage, the audience stood. A full standing ovation. Not because of the company I'd built, but because of the clarity I'd found. Later at the after-party hosted by one of our biggest venture partners, a young founder approached me with tears in her eyes. My sister does the same thing, she whispered. I thought I was the only one. I looked her in the eye and said, no, you're just one of the first to turn it into fuel. Keep going. She'll watch. She'll follow. Maybe one day she'll even apply. That night, I opened my inbox. One email stood out. Subject line, I watched the speech. It was from Abigail. No apology, no excuses. Just this, you told the truth. I didn't deserve a seat, but thank you for showing me what it looks like to earn one. I stared at the message for a long time, because it didn't fix things, but it finally said everything I'd waited years to hear. The truth had been unveiled. Not through confrontation, not through revenge, through results, through integrity, through a voice that didn't need to scream because it had finally found its volume. 6 months after that speech, I was invited to join the board of a Fortune 500 tech firm, the kind of invitation that comes with embossed stationery and private flights. I accepted. Not for the title, not for the press release, but because it meant something deeper. I had entered a room no one in my family ever imagined I'd belong in, especially not as a leader. It was a quiet Tuesday when my assistant walked in with a puzzled look. Vanessa, she said, holding a pale blue envelope. It's from Abigail. I froze. Not an email, not a text, not another public move. An actual letter, handwritten. Inside was a folded sheet ink smudged in one corner. I've started therapy, it began. And one of the first things my therapist asked was, who are you comparing yourself to? The answer was easy. You. You were always the standard. Not because of your success, but because you never needed anyone's permission to chase what you loved. I've been chasing applause. You've been chasing purpose. And it's painfully obvious which one of us ended up fulfilled. I read it 3 times. Then tucked it into the drawer beside my desk, the one where I kept the rejection letters from my first round of funding. The napkin I scribbled my original app concept on, and the framed post-it from my grandmother that said, "What they don't see in you doesn't define you." That drawer was full now, just like my life. Nexus had expanded into 3 continents. We'd just acquired a smaller company that specialized in AI-driven team management. Revenue was climbing. Staff satisfaction was at an all-time high. Zoe had been promoted to COO. She still packed lunch for both of us when we worked late. Some things don't change. And as for family, I'd learned to redefine that word. Family is who shows up because of who you are not in spite of it. Family is who lifts your name when you're not in the room. Family is chosen. Abigail and I weren't close, but we weren't enemies either. Something resembling sisterhood had slowly begun to reassemble itself, cautious, muted, but real. We met for coffee once in spring. She wore less makeup, less armor, asked more questions than she answered. And when I mentioned a new mentorship program Nexus had launched for first-gen founders, she leaned forward. "Could I volunteer?" she asked softly. I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as the girl who mocked me, not as the woman who tried to rewrite my story, but as someone who was learning finally how to be more than just a mirror of her old self. "You can apply," I said with a small smile, "like everyone else." She nodded, and for the first time didn't flinch at the idea of being measured by merit. I walked home that night beneath a lavender sky, the streetlights blinking on as if the city itself was applauding. Because I hadn't just built a company, I had built a self. One that didn't bend for recognition, one that didn't shatter under doubt, one that stood quietly even when everyone else was seated. My name was no longer up for debate. My worth wasn't negotiable. My seat at the table, I had built the damn table. And the best part, I'd done it all on my own terms. Because success doesn't mean being loud. It means being unshakable, even when the people closest to you try to convince you you're not enough. I was always enough. I just needed to stop waiting for them to say it.